Hi friend, thanks for stopping by the channel again. I appreciate you. Today we're going to do a video on the elevated steering column that I put on my Perception. It makes life so much easier when that's elevated. Your arm rests on the steering handle. Everything's a lot more comfortable. Particularly on a 10-foot kayak, you have to steer it more than you do a longer kayak. So it really made a big difference for me to have an elevated steering column. So I thought I will do a video so everybody feels comfortable in making this modification on their kayak. To do that, the unit is bolted with a single quarter 20 bolt down in here. So we're just going to rotate that. And then we can just pop that guy off of there. And before I go into details on all the bits and how that was constructed, let me talk about the whole tight steering issue that I mentioned in my review. What was happening is that the insides here were binding, and the original handle fit down in here like that. And what I noticed is when I started to take it apart to put some lube in there, that when I loosened that screw right there, things got a little bit easier. Then I loosened that screw and things got a whole lot easier. So I knew that there was some stuff in there that was binding, and that was what my real problem was. It wasn't really a lube issue. It was just that some stuff in there was binding. So I had to tear it apart because I'm a DIY guy and that's what we do. So I tore it apart, and what I found was that there's absolutely no complexity to this whatsoever. And so please do not have any apprehension about tearing this apart. Inside here is a single disc. Through that disc is where your cables go, and there's a couple of set screws that go back to, the set screws hold the cable that goes back to the rudder. So as you rotate this disc, it pulls on the cables and turns your rudder. That's it, there's nothing to it. But this disc was actually rubbing on the back side of this, and you can see there's kind of shiny sections there. And that's because when you mold thermoplastics, things move, they warp. Things move, you know, and it's just it's not a very tight tolerance sort of product. So things tend to be a little bit sloppy on a kayak anyway, and in this case it was just a little tight and it was binding. So rather than sand stuff down and destroy it, I decided, well, the simple non-invasive thing to do is to create a gasket that would elevate this off of that disc. So I created just a gasket out of neoprene rubber, and then I bolted it all back together, and boy, howdy, it got really super easy to steer. So that's definitely a quick mod that you're going to want to do if you're having problems with the ease of steering. At least in my case, that's what the issue was. All right. So that's all that's going on in there. So let's talk about the steering column itself. I realized all I needed to do in order to get a taller steering column was to take this section of the handle and replicate it on my own piece, so that the way that this was manufactured was the same as this. So I just did some measurements and made sure I understood how this was put together. And this piece right here was the piece that came with the kayak. It fit down inside there like that. And it stuck out a little bit out of the bottom of that, just like this one does, because I measured it and made it the same. So that's what I needed to do. So the first thing I realized was that if I just stuck a pipe down in there, it wasn't going to fit. It's going to look goofy. So I thought, well, I want a disc in there that's approximately the same size, right? So in order to do that, I found a round thing around the house, which is a cap off of Barbasol shaving cream, and that was perfect. And I used that to trace a circle out around a piece of black expanded PVC board. You can get that on eBay or probably Amazon. I got it at eBay. But then if I wanted to glue that on there, just butt gluing that on there wasn't going to be that good. And I knew I also had to recess a hole down in there, and I thought, well, this isn't going to be thick enough, so I need to add some more dimension to that as well. And I wanted to be glued up a little tighter. Oh, it's inside there. So what I did was I traced the inside of this guy onto the board and cut that out. I just cut this out with a bandsaw. You could do it with a coping saw. And I cleaned it up a little bit with a disc sander. And then what I did to get to this point, get to this point, it has a disc on the bottom there, is I glued this in place. And I just eyeballed it. You know, it's a kayak. It doesn't need to be perfect. So I just eyeballed it with some PVC glue, and then I put it in a vise and compressed it and let it sit there for a couple hours and get good and dry. Probably overnight's not a bad thing to do. And PVC glue on PVC board welds it like super tight. So once I had that piece there, it essentially was an end cap that I could then slide in here and glue it all in place with PVC glue. So that's essentially how I got to this point with a disc on the bottom of a piece of PVC pipe. And you could put screws in it if you feel so inclined, but the PVC glue is plenty enough. I think I could hit that with the hammer and I wouldn't be able to get it off of there. So then I eyeballed where I wanted this, and I basically wanted the center of that bolt to be in the center of the disc, and so you can get it pretty close just by eyeballing it. I drilled out a couple of pilot holes after tracing it on there, and I used a 1/4-inch chisel to chisel that section out, and then I did a lot of fitting, putting it in and out till I got it to the correct height, sticking out the bottom, the correct amount. And then I took a 1/4-inch drill bit and drilled a hole through this piece so that I knew everything lined up perfectly. And then I could insert the 1/4-20 bolt. And that's basically all I had to do to get the base of my steering column to match what was originally on the original handle. From there, you can just slide it in and bolt it in place to make sure that when you put your handle on here, that it's in line with the rudder. So in my case, for a handle, what I did was I cut out a handle out of a piece of PVC board, and you know, I did all sorts of filing so that it might fit my hand, and yeah, okay, that's all kind of overkill, but I like it. That's it's very functional. It's what I wanted to do. Then I cut a hole out of the center of that. I'm pretty sure I did do that with a coping saw and then a rasp and some sandpaper until I got it approximately the right dimension to slide over the top. PVC glue, glued it in place, and now I have a solid piece of plastic that's an elevated steering column. Then I put this guy back in place, and we'll screw it down in place. Okay, so that 1/4-20 bolt goes through this piece here and into the disc that's on the bottom. And that piece that sticks out of the bottom registers inside that disc and holds it in place. So as I rotate this part up here, it rotates that disc underneath there and rotates my rudder in the back. Now you'll notice that it does flex a little bit, and you know, this fat man, if he ever falls out of his kayak and bumps this, it's likely going to break this piece here. I recognize that is a risk. I'm okay with that as long as I have the elevated steering column, because it's so much more comfortable in doing that. If that happens, I can remanufacture this piece out of aluminum so it doesn't break the next time, and I'll actually break the handle, which then I'll have something to do. I get to remake it again. But that's how I would deal with it. I'm sure you could buy more of those pieces from Perception kayaks. This mod will work on the Perceptions, both the crank and the pilot, and whatever else ones that come out after that, most likely. And also the Wilderness kayaks have the same mechanism in here. And I would guess that just about any kayak that has a twist knob will have something very similar that you could do to elevate your steering column. Anyway, absolutely, if you're going to elevate your seat, you're going to want to elevate your steering column, because bending over all day long to steer really stinks. So anyway, if you have any questions on how I did that, I think it's relatively clear on what I did to get to this point. But if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the comment section. That was a Freudian slip. It's not the comic section. Sometimes it is, but in the comment section, and I'll be sure to answer them if I can. Okay, I really appreciate you guys stopping by. If you could please give me a thumbs up and share, subscribe, all that gobbledygook. I'd really appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.